Hello guys and girls, Ezek Hydra here, and today's video we're going to be talking again about the weapon system. Today though is going to be a comprehensive review, talking about the advantages and disadvantages of the weapon system as I see it. Obviously I'm going to be providing some of my own feedback in here. Remember, leave yours down below in the comments. I'll copy and paste it all to the developers too. Your feedback is just as important as mine. So to kick things off, I want to admit firstly that the skill attributes tied to weapons, etc., it works to a degree. It does have clear advantages. You have a very easy to balance system. If a weapon is overperforming, you can lower its damage. If a certain type of ability on a weapon is overperforming, you can lower that down. It's very neat and crisp and tidy. There's not too much interdependence. We'll come back to that later, but it's a very simple system that's easy to balance, easy to control. If one weapon's too good, you can bring it down. It won't hurt anything else. And from that sense, I think Neocore have made themselves, or rather given themselves, a very easy job in terms of balancing. And what this does is this means that we can have potential build variety that is actually viable. Now we'll come back to this a little bit later, but it is a pretty rare thing within an ARPG that you have several different options available to you. The nice thing in Martyr is I can pick up any one of the 20 weapons and I can complete a mission with all of them. In typical ARPGs you may have something like 1,000 combinations of your 4 skills, but let's be honest, probably only 3 or 4 of those combinations will actually be remotely viable. So it does have an inherent sort of value to the system, and it is also very accessible to players. You can simply pick up the game, equip a weapon, especially in the beginning of the game when you don't have many sort of attribute points or skill points. You don't have to worry about min-maxing. You can just pick up any weapon that you've got unlocked, obviously, and you can just play away and have some fun. It's a really good feature. But disadvantages, and guys, there are disadvantages to this, and one of the first is obviously the lack of customization. We'll come back to that in a little bit, but there's nothing particularly personalised about each weapon because every Tom, Dick and Harry with a lasgun has the same lasgun. We'll come back to that in a moment though. The other disadvantage for me is how Neocore have implemented the skills. Now again, they've done this in a way that is very easy to balance. They've got a pool of something like 15 to 20 different abilities. Each weapon takes 4 of those abilities, combines them together, and there you go, you've got a weapon. So you might have single fire, rapid fire, you might have a headshot, sort of aimed shot ability, you might be channeled, barrage. They all come out of this sort of pool. And the advantage here is, of course, that if one of these skills seems to be a little bit OP in terms of builds, you bring it down as a cluster, and that'll bring everything nice and neatly down into a point of balance again. But there is an issue with this, and this is a pretty big issue, because all 4 of these skills are completely independent on almost every weapon. There are a couple of exceptions, but for the vast majority, let's just pick any gun. You will probably have a single shot ability, you will probably have a rapid fire ability, which is anti-infantry, you might have an anti-armor button on your number 3, and number 4 will probably be anti-suppression. That's sort of a fairly common theme with a lot of weapons. Now the problem is, because none of them are interdependent and most of them don't have cooldowns, what this means is that there's no rotation for the weapon. There is no rotation at all. All you have to do is think, right, I'm against an armoured ability unit, what I'm going to do is mash my anti-armour key, and you're literally pressing 2. Ah, look, a bunch of infantry are coming at me. What am I going to do? Oh, I'm going to use my rapid fire fleshbane ability. Right click. And that, at the moment, is literally the complexity of the combat. It is a case of having 4 abilities, picking the right one for the job, depending on who you're against, which, if you've played a game for a while, you will learn very quickly. And that is, for me, a big disadvantage. Having played the game for just a few hours, I think you probably know everything you need to know about weapons, assuming you've tried a few different ones. There's no learning curve to each weapon. When I change from a multi-melter to a plasma cannon, as long as I've taken the time to read the tooltips, there is no skill in execution. Now, I'm not saying it's integral, but it is something to be considered. Most games that have 4 abilities will have some form. No, I think that's actually a little bit of a lie, but many games of this sort of genre will have a quote-unquote optimal rotation. Take a MOBA, for example. That's the typical game. I know it's not a MOBA, but MOBAs have 4 abilities. This game has 4 abilities. It has a lot in common with a MOBA in many senses. Most of them have an optimal rotation. You do something, it applies a debuff, you do another thing, it does that, and then you use the other thing and it does this. So yes, I think that would be something to be considered. Now, the downside to that obviously is once you start saying, okay, we've got 2 abilities, instead of both doing 100%, the first one will do 50%, so the second one can do 150%, maintaining the same total damage, but meaning that you have to use button A, B, A, B, A, B, or left click, right click, whatever. That's an option. Of course, though, when you start introducing plus 20% damage to the ability that has 150% rather than just 100%, then you start getting sort of a bit of damage creep and things start getting harder to control. I don't think they have to go with that option, but there are and there will be ways that they can introduce some form of basic sort of rotation system to some of the weapons. There are a couple little tiny inklings there that you can do this. Take, for example, a slow ability. You can apply a slow and then you can have some skill points that do plus 25% damage to a slowed enemy. That, however, is more tied to your attribute points and not to the gun itself. So the actual learning curve is more as you skill up, not when you pick up a new gun, which I do think picking up a new gun should make you play something a bit different, learn something a bit new, adapt to a new play style. For me, I think that's fairly important in providing a game with some variety. Now, on that note, the game does have a lot of weapons, so it does compensate for the lack of individuality of each weapon by having a hell of a lot of them. Obviously, we're going to see relic weapons, demon weapons, we're going to also see holy weapons. There's going to be a lot of weapons. And as well as that, there's going to be a lot of each of those 3 types as well. So we've got a lot to look forward to. But here is a bit of an issue for me. Due to Martyr's game design, if I'm playing through an area, gear typically gives you plus damage to certain weapon abilities. So let's say I've just completed power level 1. I've got my full set of purple gear. I've leveled up. It's a great day. I have a full set of gear now that gives me plus aim shot damage. That's what I've gone for. A bit of crit as well, and that is my build. I've got something like plus 30, plus 40% to aim shot abilities. This is really nice. I've even got plus 20% on the weapon. It's great. So when I get to the next zone, 2 problems. If I find a plasma cannon on the floor, even if it's purple, it's not better than my current purple weapon, because my gear is telling me that unless I have a weapon suitable to those skills, there's no point using it, because you're using, or rather you're losing, all of the bonuses you've just worked to achieve. So Martyr actually really discourages you in a way. Obviously it depends on what you're building, but Martyr can discourage you from changing weapons, or rather it can make it harder, because you can throw away 50% damage just from gear by changing to a less optimal weapon for that build. Take, for example, the critical hit. Many sniper rifles have plus 10%. You might have a critical hit build. You lose that 10% if you're going for another weapon, and critical hit may not actually serve that weapon very well. So this is a bit of an issue, and I think one of the problems is if I'm using a sniper rifle and I get to the next zone and I see a really awesome new plasma cannon on the floor, I'm probably not going to pick it up. Well, I'll pick it up and I'll salvage it, sure, but I'm not going to think, new weapon, amazing, need to use this. And some of you might be thinking, well, why? It's in the new area, it must be better, right? Well, hopefully you've seen the power level video. It's not actually better. It gives me more attack rating. Now, I do think a feature is coming in that will adapt to this. I can't say any more on it, but I do think there may be something that gives you incentive to raise your attack rating. We will have to talk about that nearer the time. But for me, at the moment, having gear that specialises in certain skill sets, rather than just skill trees that can be respect, it does sort of detract from it a little bit. Now, the second thing that I think Martyr is sort of missing, firstly, we've said that it actually sort of penalises you a little bit if you want to change a weapon. Here's the second problem. Now, I just want you to picture a game. Forget Martyr. Just absolutely forget we're talking about Martyr. We're just talking about gaming at the moment. I've made a game, okay? Just imagine I've made a game. I'm not going to tell you what genre it is. It doesn't matter. In my game, I've got loads and loads of different guns. They all shoot bullets. They're all pretty similar. They're all guns. They're each slightly different. They've each got a tiny little bit of a different play style. Now, just think in your head, a little bit of a mental exercise here. Think in your head of a few games that has that type of feature. Doesn't have to be FPS. There's third person. Heck, there's even arcade games that have this type of feature. What do you typically always see in these games? Have a think for a second. And you may disagree with me on this, but they give you incentive to swap weapons. Now, it doesn't have to say that you have to swap, but, and yes, I'm going to go with Battlefield, Call of Duty, you get a bonus to experience if you change your weapon. What does that do? That means players learn different things as they're playing. Yes, they might even think, meh, I don't really want to use that weapon, I don't like that one. Oh, I'll use this one happily though, because I quite like weapons of that class. Now, some people will throw their hands up in the air and say, whoa, 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 I don't want to use anything but this one weapon that I really like. But, it is just simply a fact that if you have a game with loads of different builds that are all fairly similar, you need, or rather you don't need, but you really should be giving people some incentive to swap. You should be making their life easy to swap, or even just giving them a very small reward. It doesn't have to be experience, it can be a quest, it could be a mission. I don't care what it is. I have lots and lots of ideas as to how they could do it, but I really think this is going to be one of the integral things to stop the game getting boring. We've already established that the weapons all feel fairly similar. That for me doesn't mean you don't need to swap. That means you need to try all of them because they have these tiny differences to each one, so you need to see what each difference is. And for me, that's the only thing, if I'm grinding several sets of gear, that's going to make me think, okay, I've just done a power level on, let's say, a sniper rifle. Had a bit of fun. Next level, I've got a little bit of incentive to use a sword and pistol in this one. Why don't I try for that and get a tiny little bonus of a schmardy blah or unlock something? I don't care what the incentive is, but I really think it would give players a lot more time before they start to get bored. Now, you can certainly make the argument that once players get bored, they'll switch weapon. I personally disagree with that. If you're bored in a game, what you do is you typically stop logging in. And at least, well, it's a feature that has been successful for many other games with similar features. Now, I do have one idea. This is just a personal idea, but we've highlighted thus far that it's difficult to change weapon, because obviously you may be geared for a certain build. We've highlighted as well that, well, there's not much incentive to use a new weapon. So, I have an idea that I think could possibly kill two birds with one stone. So when you hit a new power level, I would like some early missions in that area to kit you out with basic gear of a predetermined gear set. Not of one, maybe of you get to pick from 3, but maybe that will give you a guaranteed green quality weapon with a guaranteed 3 maybe armor pieces that give you a stat relevant to that build. Now, obviously, this might not even be relevant. Some of these complaints, once they've added a modification feature, you might think to yourself, oh, I've got a new plasma cannon, I can change my plus aimed shot damage to plus heat damage on this weapon, or rather on these armor pieces instead, and that'll work fine. If they implement that and give you enough incentive to use the gun and change the build, fine. But if you're being penalised by having to pay to do it, you might as well just think to yourself, well, the plasma cannon doesn't do any more damage at the moment, so I think I'll just wait until I get, or rather craft, a brand new sniper rifle. Guys, this is my thoughts on the weapon system at the moment. It has its advantages. Certainly is very user-friendly, easy to balance, skills are independent, so everything balance-wise this game is, yes, it will take time, but it is pretty simple to do. But, the skills don't feel very unique. There's no rotations or learning curve to the weapons, which I think is really, really a downfall at the moment. And as well as that, changing weapons is, well, there's no incentive to do it. Simply waiting till you get bored to do it, for me, I don't think it's going to happen. You're just going to race through levels with one particular item. If you get a recipe for a purple weapon X, you'll probably always craft that weapon X. until you just get bored of the game and, well, give up. Guys, that's my thoughts. Let me know what you think down below. Remember, your comments are just as important as mine, so spam out everything you think. I'll copy and paste it to the devs. Have a great weekend, guys, and looking forward to the new milestone coming this week. New faction confirmed, new fixes confirmed, as well as new map setting confirmed. Really looking forward to seeing the new faction. Rest assured you will have a video on that ASAP. Guys, have a great weekend. See you then.